the dust devil that swirled through Cimarron, New Mexico on that scorching afternoon in June of 1878 carried more than just sand and sage. It carried the scent of desperation that clung to every soul who had ever gambled everything on a dream and lost. Yancey Sutton wiped the sweat from his brow as he guided his horse toward the general store. The leather reins comfortable in his calloused hands after years of working cattle across the high desert plains. At 26, he had built something most men only dreamed of: a ranch that sprawled across 2,000 acres of New Mexico territory, complete with a sturdy house, a barn that could weather any storm, and enough cattle to make him one of the more prosperous ranchers in Colfax County. But prosperity meant little when you came home each night to empty rooms and silence broken only by the wind howling through the canyon. He had just dismounted when he noticed her standing outside the mercantile, her faded calico dress hanging loose on her thin frame, her dark hair pulled back in a braid that had seen better days. She held a small cloth bundle in her arms, clutching it like it contained everything she owned in this world. Her face, smudged with trail dust, still held traces of beauty beneath the grime and exhaustion. She could not have been more than 22 or 23, but her eyes held the weariness of someone who had seen too much hardship for such tender years. Yancey watched as she approached a well-dressed merchant emerging from the store, her voice barely audible as she spoke to him. The man waved her away dismissively without even breaking his stride, nearly knocking her aside in his haste to avoid her. She stumbled back, pressing herself against the wooden storefront as though trying to disappear into its weathered planks. Something in that gesture, the way she made herself small, the quiet dignity in how she straightened her shoulders and approached the next person, struck something deep in Yancey's chest. He had been that desperate once, years ago, when his father died and left him with nothing but debts and a failing homestead. If not for the kindness of old Samuel Morrison, who had given him work and taught him the cattle business, Yancey would have ended up drifting like tumbleweed across the territory. The woman was speaking to a rancher's wife now, her words tumbling out in a rush that Yancey could just barely hear. "Please, madam, I can cook, clean, mend clothes, tend animals, anything you need. I'm a hard worker, I promise you. I just need a chance. Any chance at all." The rancher's wife pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders as though poverty might be contagious. "I have all the help I need. Try the saloon, they are always looking for girls." The woman's face flushed red. "I am looking for honest work, madam, please." But the rancher's wife had already turned away, climbing into her wagon with her nose in the air. Yancey tied his horse to the hitching post and walked over to where the woman stood, her shoulders sagging with defeat. Up close, he could see that her dress, though worn and faded, had been carefully mended in several places. Her hands were chapped and rough, the hands of someone who knew hard work. Despite the dirt and exhaustion, there was something striking about her face, something in the set of her jaw that spoke of determination and pride, barely holding on against crushing circumstances. "Excuse me, miss," Yancey said, removing his hat. "I could not help but overhear. You are looking for work." She turned to face him, her eyes a remarkable shade of green despite their redness from dust and unshed tears meeting his with a mixture of hope and wariness. "Yes, sir. I can do most anything that needs doing. I am strong and willing to learn whatever I do not know." "What brings you to Cimarron?" Yancey asked, studying her face. She hesitated, and he saw her throat work as she swallowed. "My husband died 3 months ago. Fever took him quick. We had a small farm in Kansas, but the bank owned most of it. After he passed, they took it all. I heard there were opportunities out west, so I came hoping to find work to start over." Her voice cracked slightly on those last words, but she did not cry. Yancey respected that. Tears came easy to some folks, but the kind of strength it took to keep moving forward when everything fell apart, that was rare. "I am sorry for your loss," Yancey said, and meant it. "What is your name?" "Sadie Kimball." She shifted her bundle from one arm to the other. "And you are?" "Yancey Sutton. I run a cattle ranch about 5 miles north of town. I have been needing to hire someone to help around the house. My housekeeper left 2 months ago to live with her daughter in Santa Fe, and I have been making do with my own poor cooking ever since." He smiled slightly. "I can rope a steer and brand a calf, but I cannot make a decent biscuit to save my life." Sadie's eyes widened. "You are offering me a job just like that?" "Well, I would need to know a bit more about what you can do," Yancey said. "Can you cook?" "Yes, sir. My mother taught me everything she knew before she passed. I can make bread, stews, roasts, pies, preserves, whatever you need." "Can you keep house?" "I am not talking about just surface cleaning. I mean real maintenance, washing, mending, keeping things in order." "I kept our farmhouse spotless, even when we had barely enough water for drinking. I know how to make do with what is available." "Do you know anything about ranch life? Livestock, gardens, that sort of thing?" Sadie nodded eagerly. "We had chickens, pigs, a milk cow, and a vegetable garden. I tended them all myself when my husband worked the fields. I know how to preserve food, churn butter, make soap, candles, all of it." Yancey considered for a moment. Every instinct told him this woman was genuine, that beneath the dirt and desperation was someone who would work hard and earn her keep. But more than that, something in her eyes called to him, something that made him want to help her the way someone had once helped him. "The job pays $30 a month plus room and board," he said. "You would have your own room in the house, nothing fancy but clean and private. Meals provided. Sunday afternoons off for church or whatever you choose. Does that sound acceptable?" Sadie's eyes filled with tears then, though she blinked them back furiously. "Mr. Sutton, that sounds more than acceptable. That sounds like an answer to prayer. When would you want me to start? How about right now? I need to pick up some supplies, then we can head to the ranch." "Unless you have somewhere else you need to be." She shook her head. "Everything I own is in this bundle. I have been sleeping in the church basement for the past 3 nights, living on the charity of Reverend Matthews. I am ready to work for my keep again." Something twisted in Yancey's chest at the thought of this woman sleeping in a church basement, begging for scraps of work from people too comfortable to care. "Well, those days are behind you now. Come on, let me get my supplies and we will head home." As they walked into the general store together, Yancey noticed the way people stared. A young woman traveling alone with a man she just met, it would set tongues wagging, no doubt. But Yancey had never cared much for gossip, and something told him Sadie had weathered worse than small town rumors. Inside the mercantile, Yancey introduced Sadie to Walter Preston, who ran the store with his wife. "Mr. Preston, this is Sadie Kimball. She will be working as my housekeeper. I imagine she will be coming into town from time to purchase supplies for the household." Walter Preston was a decent man, fair in his dealings and not given to judgment. He nodded respectfully to Sadie. "Pleased to meet you, Mrs. Kimball. Yancey here is one of our best customers. You need anything, you just let me know." "Thank you, sir," Sadie said quietly, but Yancey noticed how she stood a little straighter, how some of the defeated slump had left her shoulders. Having someone treat her with basic human dignity probably meant more than Preston could know. Yancey ordered his usual supplies: flour, sugar, coffee, beans, and various other staples. Then he turned to Sadie. "Is there anything you need? Any supplies for the kitchen or for yourself?" She looked uncomfortable. "I do not want to presume, Mr. Sutton. You are already being so generous. You cannot cook without proper supplies, and I reckon you could use a few personal items. Pick out what you need. Consider it an advance on your wages." After some hesitation, Sadie selected a few modest items: a new bar of soap, some fabric for making aprons, and basic cooking supplies she thought might be lacking in his kitchen. Yancey added several more items to the order, including a warm shawl for the cool desert nights and a sturdy pair of work boots when he noticed that hers were nearly worn through. "Mr. Sutton, this is too much," Sadie protested. "You cannot work in boots with holes in them," Yancey said simply. "And New Mexico nights get cold, even in summer. You will need that shawl." As Walter Preston tallied up the order, his wife Martha came from the back room. She was a plump, motherly woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner. She took one look at Sadie and immediately began fussing over her. "Good heavens, child, you look half-starved," Martha said. "Walter, get her some of those cookies from the jar and pour her a cup of water from the good pitcher." "Mrs. Preston, I could not," Sadie began, but Martha was already pressing a cookie into her hand. "Nonsense. You eat that right now. And you," she turned to Yancey, "you make sure this girl gets 3 square meals a day. She is nothing but skin and bones." Yancey smiled. "I promise, Mrs. Preston. That is exactly why I hired her, so she can cook proper meals for both of us." The ride out to the ranch took about an hour, following a well-worn trail that wound through the high desert landscape. The sun beat down mercilessly, but Yancey kept the horses at an easy pace, mindful that Sadie looked exhausted. She sat beside him on the wagon bench, quiet but alert, her eyes taking in everything: the red rock formations rising in the distance, the scrub brush and pinon pines dotting the landscape, the vast expanse of sky that seemed to go on forever. "It is so different from Kansas," she said finally. "So much more open, so much sky." "You get used to it," Yancey said. "Some people find all this emptiness unsettling, but I have always found it peaceful. Out here you can breathe, you can think." "I think I could grow to like it," Sadie said softly. "It feels like a place where you could leave the past behind, start fresh." "That is what most folks come west for," Yancey agreed. "A second chance." They fell into a comfortable silence, broken only by the creak of the wagon wheels and the steady clip-clop of the horses' hooves. Yancey found himself acutely aware of the woman beside him, the way she held herself upright despite her obvious exhaustion, the delicate curve of her jaw, the way her eyes caught the light. He shook his head slightly, reminding himself that he had hired her as a housekeeper, nothing more. She was a widow, still grieving, and deserved respect and distance while she found her footing again. The ranch came into view as they crested a small rise, a sprawling collection of buildings nestled in a valley with good water from a creek that ran year-round. The main house was built of adobe and wood, sturdy and practical, with a wide porch that caught the evening breeze. Beyond it stood the barn, the bunkhouse, corrals, and various outbuildings. Cattle dotted the landscape, grazing peacefully in the late afternoon sun. "Oh," Sadie breathed, and Yancey turned to see wonder in her eyes. "It is beautiful." "It is home," Yancey said simply, but he felt a surge of pride. He had built this place from almost nothing, working 18-hour days for years to turn his dream into reality. Having someone appreciate it, someone who understood what it meant to lose everything and fight to rebuild, that meant something. As they pulled up to the house, several ranch hands emerged from the barn, curious about their boss's unexpected passenger. Yancey introduced Sadie as his new housekeeper, and to their credit, the men were polite and welcoming. They were good men. Yancey did not tolerate troublemakers or anyone who disrespected women. His foreman, an older cowboy named Garrett Walsh, tipped his hat to Sadie. "Pleased to meet you, madam. We are surely glad to have someone who can cook proper meals again. No offense to the boss, but his attempts at cooking have been punishment for our sins." That drew a small smile from Sadie, the first genuine one Yancey had seen. It transformed her face, chasing away some of the shadows and revealing the lovely woman beneath the hardship. Yancey helped Sadie down from the wagon and carried her bundle as he showed her into the house. The interior was clean but clearly lacked a woman's touch. Functional furniture, bare walls, everything practical but devoid of warmth or decoration. The kitchen was large and well-equipped, though dishes were piled in the dry sink and dust had accumulated in the corners. "I know it is not much to look at right now," Yancey said, feeling suddenly embarrassed by the state of things. "I have been managing on my own, but housekeeping has not been my priority." "It has good bones," Sadie said, looking around with an appraising eye. "It just needs some attention, some care. I can work with this." He showed her to the bedroom that would be hers, a small room off the kitchen with a narrow bed, a dresser, and a window that looked out toward the mountains. The room had belonged to his previous housekeeper, an elderly widow named Mrs. Fletcher, who had kept house for him for 2 years before her age and failing health drove her to live with family. "I know it is modest," Yancey began, but Sadie cut him off. "Mr. Sutton, this is wonderful. I have my own room, my own bed, a roof over my head, and honest work to do. This is more than I have had in months. I cannot thank you enough." Her voice cracked again, and this time a few tears did slip down her cheeks. She wiped them away quickly, embarrassed. "I am sorry. I do not mean to be so emotional. It has just been such a difficult time." "No need to apologize," Yancey said gently. "You have been through a lot. Why do not you take some time to settle in, wash up, rest a bit? There is a pump out back for water. I will check on the hands and give you some privacy." Sadie nodded gratefully. "Thank you, and Mr. Sutton, thank you for taking a chance on me. I promise I will not let you down." "I believe you," Yancey said, and realized he meant it completely. That first evening, Sadie insisted on cooking dinner despite her exhaustion. Yancey tried to convince her to rest, but she was adamant. "You hired me to cook and keep house," she said firmly. "The sooner I start, the sooner I can prove my worth." She rummaged through the pantry and what remained of the supplies, eventually producing a simple but delicious meal of beans, bacon, cornbread, and fried potatoes. It was nothing fancy, but after weeks of Yancey's disastrous attempts at cooking, it tasted like the finest restaurant fare. They ate at the kitchen table, the silence comfortable rather than awkward. Yancey noticed that Sadie ate slowly, deliberately, savoring each bite as though she could not quite believe there would be more food tomorrow. "This is excellent," Yancey said. "If all your cooking is like this, I might actually gain some weight back." Sadie smiled, a genuine expression that reached her eyes. "Wait until I can plan proper meals with time to prepare. This was just thrown together from what I could find." After dinner, Sadie insisted on washing the dishes while Yancey sat on the porch, going over the ranch accounts. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange, pink, and purple. Through the open window, he could hear Sadie moving around the kitchen, humming softly to herself. It was a sound the house had not held in months, and Yancey found it unexpectedly comforting. Later, as darkness fell and the coyotes began their evening chorus, Yancey knocked softly on Sadie's door. "Come in," she called. He opened the door to find her sitting on the edge of the bed, brushing out her long dark hair. She had washed and changed into a clean nightgown, one of the few possessions she owned. In the lamplight, with her hair loose around her shoulders and her face clean, she looked younger, softer, heartbreakingly vulnerable. "I just wanted to make sure you have everything you need," Yancey said, keeping his eyes respectfully on her face. "I have more than I need," Sadie said softly. "Mr. Sutton, I want you to know how much this means to me. When I came to Cimarron, I was at the end of my rope. I had exactly $2 to my name and nowhere to go. You saved my life today." "I just gave you a job," Yancey said, uncomfortable with her gratitude. "You will earn your keep through your work." It was more than a job. It was hope. It was dignity. It was a future when I thought I had none. She stood, crossing to where he stood in the doorway. Up close, he could smell the soap she had used, could see the flecks of gold in her green eyes. "I will not forget this kindness. Ever." Yancey felt something shift in his chest, something that had nothing to do with kindness or charity and everything to do with the woman standing before him. He took a step back, needing distance. "Get some rest, Mrs. Kimball. Tomorrow will be a long day." "Good night, Mr. Sutton, and thank you." The days that followed fell into a comfortable rhythm. Sadie proved to be everything she had claimed: an excellent cook, a meticulous housekeeper, and a tireless worker. She rose before dawn to prepare breakfast for Yancey and the ranch hands, spending her days cleaning, mending, baking, and tending to the vegetable garden she had immediately begun planning. Within a week, the house had been transformed from a bachelor's functional dwelling into a real home, complete with curtains she had sewn from fabric purchased in town, fresh flowers on the table, and the constant smell of bread baking or stew simmering. But more than her domestic skills, it was Sadie herself who transformed the ranch. She had a quick wit and a quiet sense of humor that emerged as she grew more comfortable. She was kind to the ranch hands, treating them with respect and motherly concern that they responded to with loyalty and protectiveness. She was intelligent, offering observations about ranch operations that showed she paid attention and thought deeply about things. And she was beautiful. As proper food and rest restored her health, the gauntness left her face and her eyes lost their haunted quality. Her skin took on a warm glow from working in the garden, her hair shone in the sunlight, and her smile came more easily each day. Yancey found himself thinking about her at odd moments while riding fence line, while working with the cattle, while lying in bed at night. He would remember the way she laughed at something Garrett said, or the way she hummed while kneading bread dough, or the way her eyes lit up when she talked about the garden she was planting. He told himself it was just appreciation for a good employee, but he knew he was lying to himself. He wanted her. Not just physically, though God knew he lay awake nights thinking about what it would be like to kiss her, to hold her, to make her his in every way. But beyond that, he wanted her presence, her voice, her thoughts and dreams and fears. He wanted the right to protect her, to care for her, to build a future with her. But she was his employee, dependent on him for her livelihood, and she was a widow, still wearing the grief of her lost husband. The last thing she needed was her employer making unwanted advances. So Yancey kept his distance, treating her with scrupulous politeness, never giving any indication of the feelings growing stronger each day. Sadie, for her part, found herself thinking about Yancey far more than was appropriate. He was unfailingly kind to her, respectful, generous with his praise for her work. But beyond that, she admired the man. He was hardworking, fair with his employees, honest in his dealings, quick to help neighbors in need. She had been married before, yes, but her marriage to Thomas had been one of practicality more than passion. He had been a good man, and she had cared for him, but she had never felt her heart race when he entered a room. She had never caught herself watching him work, admiring the play of muscles in his arms, the strength in his hands, the way sunlight caught in his dark blonde hair. With Yancey, she felt all of that and more. She felt safe with him, but also alive in a way she had never been before. She found herself dressing more carefully, taking extra pains with her appearance, living for the moments when he complimented her cooking or smiled at something she said. It both thrilled and terrified her. One evening in early August, about 6 weeks after Sadie had arrived at the ranch, Yancey returned from town with news. He found Sadie in the kitchen, preserving peaches from the tree behind the house, her face flushed from the heat of the stove. "There is going to be a dance in town this Saturday," he said, leaning against the doorframe. "The whole community will be there. It is a big social event. I thought maybe you would like to go, meet more people, get out of the house for an evening." Sadie looked up from her work, wiping a strand of hair from her face. "A dance? I have not been to a dance in years. Thomas never cared for them." "You do not have to go if you do not want to," Yancey said quickly. "I just thought you might enjoy it." "I think I would enjoy it very much," Sadie said, smiling, "but I do not have anything suitable to wear to a dance." Yancey had anticipated this. "There is a dressmaker in town, Mrs. Chen. She is very good and her prices are fair. Why do not you go into town tomorrow and have her make you something? Consider it a bonus for all the hard work you have been doing. Mr. Sutton, I cannot let you buy me a dress. You already pay me more than fairly. Then consider it a loan against future wages if that makes you feel better. But you have been working yourself to the bone and you deserve something nice. Please, Sadie, let me do this." The use of her first name, which he rarely employed, made her heart skip. She found she could not refuse him. "All right, thank you. That is very kind." The dance was held in the town's community hall, a large wooden building that served multiple purposes throughout the year. By the time Yancey and Sadie arrived in the wagon, the place was already crowded with ranchers, townspeople, and families from the surrounding area. Lanterns hung from the rafters, casting a warm glow over the assembled crowd, and a group of musicians were tuning their instruments on a small stage at one end of the room. Sadie wore her new dress, a simple but elegant creation in deep blue cotton that brought out her eyes. Mrs. Chen had outdone herself, creating a garment that fit Sadie perfectly and made her look like a lady rather than a hired housekeeper. She had pinned her hair up in a soft arrangement that showed off the graceful line of her neck, and Yancey had to remind himself to breathe when she emerged from her room ready to go. As they entered the hall, heads turned. Yancey was well known and respected in the community, and the sight of him arriving with his beautiful housekeeper set tongues immediately wagging. But Yancey kept his head high and his hand respectfully at the small of Sadie's back as he guided her through the crowd, introducing her to neighbors and friends. Most people were welcoming, curious about the woman who had taken over managing Yancey's household. But Yancey did not miss the disapproving looks from some of the more proper ladies or the interested gazes from several unmarried men. He felt a surge of possessiveness that he had no right to feel. When the music started, Yancey turned to Sadie. "May I have this dance?" She smiled up at him, her eyes sparkling in the lamplight. "I would be honored." He led her onto the dance floor, one hand taking hers while the other rested on her waist. The music was a simple waltz and they began to move together. Sadie was a good dancer, light on her feet and easy to lead. Yancey was acutely aware of the warmth of her hand in his, the subtle scent of the lavender soap she used, the way she fit perfectly in his arms. "You are a wonderful dancer," Sadie said, looking up at him with a smile. "My mother insisted I learn," Yancey replied. "She said a gentleman should know how to dance properly. I complained bitterly at the time, but I am grateful now." They danced in comfortable silence for a moment before Sadie spoke again. "People are staring at us." "Let them stare," Yancey said firmly. "You have every right to be here, to dance, to enjoy yourself. Anyone who has a problem with it can take it up with me." "You are very protective," Sadie said softly, something in her voice that Yancey could not quite identify. "I look after what is mine," Yancey said, then immediately wished he could take the words back. "I mean, what is my responsibility? My employees. Sadie's expression flickered with something that might have been disappointment, but she said nothing, just continued dancing. The evening progressed with more dancing, conversation, and food. Several other men asked Sadie to dance, which Yancey allowed, though he hated every minute of it. He watched from the sidelines as she waltzed with a local shopkeeper, as she smiled at something a young rancher said, as she laughed at a joke from the banker. Each time, he felt a burning in his chest that he recognized as jealousy. It was Garrett, his foreman, who finally called him on it. The older cowboy sidled up to Yancey with 2 cups of punch and handed him one. "You are going to wear a hole in the floor with all that pacing," Garrett said mildly. "I am not pacing," Yancey said defensively. "You have been watching her like a hawk watches a rabbit. If you care for the girl, why do not you tell her? She is my employee, it would not be appropriate," Garrett snorted. "That is horse manure and you know it. I have seen the way she looks at you when you are not watching. That girl cares for you too. Life is short, boss. Do not let pride or propriety keep you from happiness." Before Yancey could respond, he noticed a commotion on the dance floor. A man he did not recognize, clearly drunk, despite the early hour, had grabbed Sadie's arm and was pulling her toward him aggressively. Sadie was trying to pull away, her face pale with distress. Yancey crossed the room in 4 long strides. "Let her go." The drunk turned, his face flushed and belligerent. "Mind your own business. The lady agreed to dance with me." "I did no such thing," Sadie said firmly. "I told you no and you grabbed me. Let her go." Yancey's voice was quiet but carried a threat that made the drunk hesitate. "Or what?" The man sneered, but his grip on Sadie's arm loosened slightly. Yancey did not waste time with words. He grabbed the man's wrist, applying pressure to a point that made the drunk yelp and release Sadie immediately. "You owe the lady an apology." "I do not apologize to whores," the drunk slurred, and that was his mistake. Yancey's fist connected with the man's jaw in a clean, economical punch that sent him sprawling backward into a table. The room went silent. "The next person who disrespects Mrs. Kimball will get worse," Yancey announced to the room at large. "She is a lady and deserves to be treated as such. Anyone who cannot manage that can leave now." The drunk's friends hurried forward to collect him, dragging him toward the door while muttering apologies. The musicians, after a moment of stunned silence, began playing again, and conversation slowly resumed. Yancey turned to Sadie, who was rubbing her arm where the drunk had grabbed her. "Are you all right? Did he hurt you?" "I am fine," Sadie said, but her voice shook slightly. "Thank you for intervening. I did not know what to do." "You never have to tolerate that kind of treatment from anyone," Yancey said fiercely. "Never, do you understand?" She nodded, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Can we leave? I am sorry, I know the evening is not over, but I just want to go home." "Of course. Let me get your shawl." The ride back to the ranch was quiet, both of them lost in thought. The moon was nearly full, bathing the desert landscape in silver light. About halfway home, Sadie finally broke the silence. "You called me a lady." "You are a lady," Yancey said firmly. "I am a widow with nothing to my name, working as a housekeeper. Most people would not call that a lady. Most people are fools. Being a lady has nothing to do with money or social standing. It is about character, about dignity, about how you treat others. And by that measure, you are more of a lady than half the so-called respectable women in that room tonight." Sadie was quiet for a long moment. "Why did you really hire me, Yancey?" The use of his first name startled him. "What do you mean?" "You saw me for all of 5 minutes, knew nothing about me except that I was desperate. You could have hired anyone. Why me?" Yancey considered his answer carefully. "Because I saw something in you that reminded me of myself. I was not always a successful rancher. When I was 19, My father died and left me with nothing but debts. I was about to lose everything when Samuel Morrison, a rancher over in Mora County, gave me a job. He did not know me, had no reason to trust me, but he took a chance. He taught me everything about ranching, gave me opportunities to learn and grow. When he died 5 years later, he left me enough money to buy this land and start my own spread. I hired you because someone once gave me a chance when I needed it most, and I saw that you deserved the same. Was that the only reason? Sadie asked softly. Yancey looked at her, at the way the moonlight caught in her hair, at the vulnerability and hope in her eyes. He could lie, could maintain the professional distance he had been so careful to preserve. Or he could be honest. No, he admitted. From the moment I saw you, something in me recognized something in you. I cannot explain it better than that. I just knew I had to help you, had to have you in my life somehow. Sadie drew in a sharp breath. Yancey, you do not have to say anything, Yancey interrupted, suddenly afraid of what she might say. I know I am your employer and that makes things complicated. I know you are still grieving your husband. I am not asking for anything, Sadie. I just want you to know that you are safe here, that you are valued, that you are, he stopped, unable to finish. That I am what? Sadie pressed. That you are important to me, Yancey finished quietly. More important than you should be. They had reached the ranch, and Yancey pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the house. He climbed down and came around to help Sadie, but when he reached up to lift her down, she did not immediately let go when her feet touched the ground. Instead, she stood there in the circle of his arms, looking up at him. I was married for 3 years, she said quietly. Thomas was a good man and I cared for him, but I never felt about him the way I feel about you. What I had with him was comfortable, safe, practical. What I feel when I am with you is different. It is exciting and terrifying and wonderful all at once. I do not know if that is wrong, if it is too soon, if I should feel guilty for it, but I cannot help it. Yancey's heart was pounding so hard he was sure she must hear it. What are you saying? I am saying that you are important to me too. I am saying that when you defended me tonight, when you called me a lady, when you looked at that terrible man like you wanted to tear him apart for touching me, I have never felt so protected, so valued, so treasured. I am saying that I think about you constantly, that I live for the moments when you smile at me, that she did not get to finish because Yancey was kissing her, his hands cradling her face like she was something precious and fragile. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, giving her every opportunity to pull away. But instead she leaned into him, her arms wrapping around his neck, kissing him back with a passion that made his head spin. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Yancey rested his forehead against hers. I am in love with you, he said, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. I know it is too soon. I know it is complicated, but I cannot keep pretending otherwise. I love you, Sadie. Tears streamed down her face, but she was smiling. I love you too. I think I have from almost the beginning, but I was too afraid to admit it even to myself. They kissed again, longer this time, deeper, full of promise and possibility. When they finally went inside, Yancey walked Sadie to her door, both of them reluctant to part. I do not want to rush you, Yancey said, holding both her hands in his. I know you need time, that this is all happening fast, but I want you to know my intentions are honorable. I do not just want you for a night or for convenience. I want to marry you, Sadie. I want to make you my wife, to build a life with you, to give you everything you deserve. I want that too, Sadie whispered. But you are right, we should take some time, do this properly. People already talk about us. I do not want there to be any question about our relationship being appropriate. Then we will court properly, Yancey said. I will come calling, bring you flowers, take you on picnics. We will give the town gossips nothing to complain about. Sadie laughed, the sound light and happy. That sounds wonderful. The next several months were the happiest Yancey could remember. He courted Sadie with old-fashioned propriety, treating her like the lady she was. He brought her wildflowers picked from the meadows, took her on rides to see the beautiful places on his ranch, sat with her on the porch in the evenings talking about everything and nothing. He learned about her childhood in Missouri, her parents who had died when she was young, her marriage to Thomas and the farm they had tried to build. She learned about his dreams for expanding the ranch, his memories of his parents, his vision for the future. They attended church together on Sundays, sitting side by side in the pew while the town whispered and speculated. They went to socials and dances, where Yancey made it clear through his attentiveness that Sadie was spoken for. He asked her father's permission to court her, or would have if her father had been alive. Instead, he spoke with Reverend Matthews, the minister who had given Sadie shelter when she first arrived in town, asking for his blessing and guidance. The Reverend was pleased. "I prayed for that young woman to find a good situation," he told Yancey. "I never imagined the Lord would provide not just employment but love. You are a good man, Yancey Sutton, and she is a fine woman. You have my blessing and my prayers." As autumn painted the mountains in shades of gold and crimson, Yancey knew he could not wait any longer. He loved Sadie more each day, and he wanted to make their relationship official, to give her his name and his protection permanently. He planned the proposal carefully. On a Sunday afternoon in late October, he took Sadie on a ride to a special place on his property, a high meadow with a view that stretched for miles, showing the full sweep of the ranch and the mountains beyond. Aspen trees surrounded the meadow, their leaves golden in the autumn sun, and a small stream bubbled through the middle of it. "This is beautiful," Sadie breathed as they dismounted. "I did not know this place existed. I come here when I need to think, to make big decisions," Yancey said. "I bought the ranch standing in this very spot, looking out at all this land and imagining what it could become. I wanted to bring you here because this is where I first envisioned my future, and now I cannot imagine that future without you in it." He took her hands, his heart pounding but his voice steady. "Sadie Kimball, you came into my life when I was not even looking for anyone. You have turned my house into a home, brought joy and laughter and love into days that were just about work and survival. You have made me want to be a better man, to build something bigger than just a successful ranch. I want to build a family, a legacy, a life full of love, and I want to build it with you." He released one of her hands to reach into his pocket, pulling out a small box. Inside was a ring, a simple gold band with a small diamond, modest but well made. "Sadie, will you marry me? Will you let me give you my name, my home, my heart? Will you be my wife?" Sadie was crying, tears streaming down her face as she nodded vigorously. "Yes," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "Yes, Yancey, I will marry you. I love you so much." He slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into his arms, kissing her deeply while the golden leaves swirled around them in the autumn breeze. When they finally pulled apart, both were laughing and crying at once. "When?" Sadie asked. "When can we get married?" "As soon as you want," Yancey said. "Tomorrow, next week, next month, you choose." "I want a real wedding," Sadie said. "Nothing fancy, but I want our friends there. I want to be married in the church. I want to do it right. Is a month too soon?" "A month sounds perfect." They were married on a crisp November morning in the Cimarron church, with what seemed like half the town in attendance. Sadie wore a cream-colored dress that Mrs. Chen had worked on for 3 weeks, creating a gown that was simple but elegant, perfect for a bride who was starting her life over. Yancey wore his best suit, newly purchased for the occasion, his boots polished to a shine. Reverend Matthews performed the ceremony. speaking movingly about second chances, about how God brings people together in unexpected ways, about the power of love to heal and restore. When Yancey placed the wedding band on Sadie's finger and promised to love, honor, and cherish her all the days of his life, his voice was strong and sure. When Sadie made the same promises to him, her eyes never left his face, her love shining clear for everyone to see. "I now pronounce you man and wife," Reverend Matthews said with a broad smile. "Yancey, you may kiss your bride." And kiss her he did, pulling her close and claiming her lips in a kiss that left no doubt about his feelings. The congregation erupted in applause and cheers. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard and enough food to feed an army. Sadie had cooked for days with help from several women from town, preparing a feast that would be talked about for years. There was dancing, laughter, toasts, and celebration that lasted well into the evening. Finally, as the last guests departed and the stars came out in the clear New Mexico sky, Yancey swept his bride up in his arms and carried her across the threshold of the house, their house now, truly their home. "Hello, Mrs. Sutton," Yancey said, setting her down gently in the bedroom that was now theirs to share. "I like the sound of that," Sadie said, reaching up to loosen his collar. "I like it very much." That night, they came together as husband and wife, their love expressed in the most intimate way possible. Yancey was gentle and patient, mindful that despite her previous marriage, Sadie had never known passion like this. He took his time, worshiping every inch of her, showing her with his body what his words could not fully express, that she was loved, desired, treasured beyond measure. Afterward, as they lay tangled together in the moonlight streaming through the window, Sadie traced lazy patterns on Yancey's chest. "I never knew it could be like this," she said softly. "With Thomas it was duty, something that happened in the dark and was never discussed. This was different, this was beautiful." Yancey kissed her forehead. "You are beautiful. And I plan to show you every day for the rest of our lives how much I love you." "Promise?" Sadie asked, smiling up at him. "Promise," Yancey confirmed. Their first year of marriage was full of joy and adjustment, as they learned to live together as husband and wife, rather than employer and employee. Sadie continued to manage the household, but now she also took an active role in ranch decisions, her sharp mind and practical nature proving invaluable. She started raising chickens and expanded the garden, bringing in extra income from selling eggs and vegetables in town. She befriended the wives of neighboring ranchers, building a social network that benefited both of them. Yancey, for his part, did everything he could to show Sadie how much he loved and valued her. He consulted her on major decisions, made sure she had everything she needed, and never took for granted the gift of her presence in his life. He would sometimes stop in the middle of his workday just to go find her and kiss her, unable to believe his good fortune in finding such a woman. In the spring of 1879, Sadie discovered she was pregnant. She told Yancey one evening after dinner, her face glowing with happiness and a touch of nervousness. "Are you sure?" Yancey asked, hardly daring to believe it. "I am sure. Mrs. Preston helped me confirm it. We are going to have a baby, Yancey." He let out a whoop of joy that could probably be heard all the way in town, sweeping her up and spinning her around before carefully setting her down, suddenly worried he might hurt her. "I am going to be a father. We are going to be parents. Are you happy?" Sadie asked, even though his joy was obvious. "Happy does not even begin to cover it," Yancey said, placing his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "A child, our child. Sadie, you have given me everything: a home, love, and now a family. I am the luckiest man alive." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though Yancey became almost comically overprotective. He did not want Sadie lifting anything heavy, working too hard, or doing anything that might endanger her or the baby. Sadie tolerated his fussing with good humor, even as she continued managing the household and helping with light ranch work. In December of 1879, during a snowstorm that blanketed the ranch in white, Sadie went into labor. Yancey rode through the blizzard to fetch the midwife, Mrs. Chen, who had been standing by for the past week. The labor was long and difficult, testing Sadie's strength and Yancey's nerves. He paced the kitchen while Mrs. Chen and Martha Preston worked with Sadie in the bedroom, feeling helpless and terrified. Finally, as dawn broke and the snow began to taper off, a baby's cry pierced the air. Yancey rushed to the bedroom door as Mrs. Chen emerged, smiling broadly. "You have a son," she announced. "A big, healthy boy, and your wife is tired but doing well." Yancey entered the room to find Sadie propped up in bed, exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. She looked up as he approached, her smile tired but brilliant. "Meet your son," she said softly. Yancey sat carefully on the edge of the bed, looking down at the tiny face of his newborn child. The baby had a shock of dark hair and was already waving tiny fists in the air. Emotion overwhelmed Yancey, love so fierce and protective it hurt, gratitude for his wife's safe delivery, awe at the miracle of new life. "He is perfect," Yancey whispered. "You are amazing. I love you so much." "I love you too," Sadie said. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names for weeks, finally settling on James Wyatt Sutton, James for Sadie's father and Wyatt for Yancey's. Little James, or Jamie as they soon took to calling him, was a good baby, healthy and strong. He had his mother's green eyes and his father's determination, making his preferences known from the very start. Being parents brought Yancey and Sadie even closer together. They took turns walking the floor with Jamie when he was fussy, worked together to manage the household and ranch with a baby in the mix, and marveled together at each new milestone: his first smile, his first tooth, his first word. The years passed in a rhythm of work and family, hardship and joy. The ranch prospered under Yancey's management and Sadie's careful stewardship of the household finances. They added to their land holdings, increased their cattle herd, and built a reputation for quality stock and fair dealing. In 1882, their second child was born, a daughter they named Rose Marie, with her father's blonde hair and her mother's delicate features. Jamie, now 2.5, was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to help with everything despite his young age. "We have a boy and a girl," Sadie said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Rose nursing contentedly while Jamie played with his wooden horses at their feet. "Our family feels complete." "It does," Yancey agreed, his arm around his wife's shoulders. "Though I would not complain if more children came along," Sadie laughed. "Let me recover from this one first before we talk about more." But more children did come. Another son, Thomas, in 1884, named for Sadie's first husband as a way of honoring her past while embracing her present. And finally, in 1887, twin girls, Sarah and Elizabeth, who completed their family at 6 children and brought chaos and joy in equal measure through it all. The love between Yancey and Sadie only grew stronger. They had weathered droughts and harsh winters, financial difficulties and illness, the challenges of raising children and running a ranch. But they had weathered it all together, their partnership built on a foundation of mutual respect, trust, and deep, abiding love. One evening in the summer of 1895, as they celebrated their 16th wedding anniversary, Yancey and Sadie sat on the porch watching their children play in the yard. Jamie, now 15, was teaching his younger brother Thomas how to rope a fence post. Rose, 13, was reading a book in the shade of the cottonwood tree while keeping an eye on the 8-year-old twins, who were chasing fireflies in the gathering dusk. "Do you ever think about that day in town?" Yancey asked, taking Sadie's hand. "When I first saw you outside the Mercantile." "I think about it often," Sadie admitted. "I was at the lowest point of my life. I had nothing, no prospects, no hope, and then you appeared like an answer to a prayer I had been too afraid to pray." "I saw a woman who needed help," Yancey said. "I had no idea I was looking at my future wife, the mother of my children, the love of my life." "I saw a kind stranger," Sadie said. "I had no idea he would become my everything." She leaned her head on his shoulder, and they sat in comfortable silence, watching their children and listening to the familiar sounds of the ranch settling in for the evening, the lowing of cattle, the call of a nighthawk, the gentle rustle of cottonwood leaves. "I love you, Yancey Sutton," Sadie said softly. "Thank you for seeing me that day, for taking a chance on me, for giving me not just a job but a whole new life." "I love you, Sadie Sutton," Yancey replied. "Thank you for saying yes to all of it, the job, the courtship, the proposal, this life we have built. You are the best decision I ever made." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, their children's laughter floating on the evening breeze, Yancey and Sadie sat together in perfect contentment, grateful for the unexpected journey that had brought them together and the love that had sustained them through everything. Years continued to pass in the steady rhythm of ranch life. Jamie grew into a fine young man who shared his father's passion for ranching and eventually took over more of the daily operations, allowing Yancey to slow down as he entered his 50s. Rose surprised everyone by marrying a schoolteacher and moving to Santa Fe, where she opened a school of her own. Thomas became a horse trader with a gift for breaking and training even the wildest mustangs. The twins, Sarah and Elizabeth, were inseparable and eventually married brothers, building homes on adjacent properties just outside of town. Through it all, the ranch remained the heart of the Sutton family, a place where children and eventually grandchildren gathered for holidays and celebrations. Yancey and Sadie watched their family grow, their hearts full as they saw their children build good lives and families of their own. In the spring of 1910, Yancey and Sadie celebrated their 32nd wedding anniversary surrounded by their 6 children, 14 grandchildren, and 2 great-grandchildren. The ranch house, expanded over the years to accommodate the growing family, rang with laughter and the chaos of multiple generations gathering together. As the celebration wound down and the younger families headed home, Yancey and Sadie found themselves once again on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. 32 years, Sadie mused, her hair now silver but her eyes still that same brilliant green that had captured Yancey's heart so long ago. Sometimes it feels like a lifetime, and sometimes it feels like just yesterday that I was standing outside the Mercantile, desperate and afraid. "You were never afraid," Yancey said, his own hair white and his face lined with age but his smile still warm and loving. "Desperate maybe, but you faced it with such courage and dignity. That was what drew me to you in the first place." "We have had a good life," Sadie said, taking his weathered hand in hers. "Better than I ever dreamed possible." "The best life," Yancey agreed. "And we are not done yet. I still have plans for us." Sadie laughed, the sound as bright and joyful as it had been when she was 23. "What kind of plans?" "I am thinking maybe we should take a trip. We have never seen the ocean. What would you say to traveling to California, seeing the Pacific, at our age?" Sadie asked, but her eyes sparkled with interest. "Why not? Jamie can handle the ranch. The children are all settled. We have earned the right to an adventure or two in our golden years." "Then let us do it," Sadie said decisively. "Let us see the ocean together." They made that trip in the summer of 1910, traveling by train across the Southwest to California. They stood together on a beach in San Diego, holding hands as they watched the sun set over the Pacific, the waves rolling in with steady rhythm. It was different from the desert sunsets they knew so well, but equally beautiful. "Worth the journey?" Yancey asked. "Every journey with you is worth it," Sadie replied. They returned to the ranch refreshed and full of stories, settling back into the comfortable routine of their lives. But they continued to make smaller trips to Albuquerque to see Rose and her family, to Denver for Jamie's wedding to a sweet-natured woman named Catherine, to visit the twins and their growing families. Through it all, their love remained constant. They still held hands when they walked, still stole kisses when they thought no one was watching, still looked at each other with the same tenderness and passion that had marked their early days together. As they entered their 70s, age began to slow them down. Yancey's knees ached from decades of ranch work, and Sadie's hands sometimes trembled with arthritis. But they faced aging the same way they had faced everything else together, with humor and grace and unwavering support for each other. One evening in the autumn of 1920, as they sat on the porch wrapped in blankets against the cool evening air, Sadie turned to Yancey with a serious expression. "I want you to know something," she said. "If I had known what would happen, that Thomas would die, that I would lose everything, that I would end up desperate and alone in a strange town, I would still go through all of it. Because it led me to you, and you have given me the most wonderful life I could have imagined." Yancey's eyes filled with tears, something that happened more easily in his old age. "And if I had known that stopping to help a desperate woman outside a mercantile would lead to the greatest love of my life, I would have done it 1,000 times over. You are my heart, Sadie. You always have been." They sat together in the gathering darkness, holding hands and watching the stars emerge one by one, grateful for the unexpected journey that had brought them together and the decades of love they had shared. Yancey Sutton passed away peacefully in his sleep on a cold January night in 1925, at the age of 73. He died as he had lived his later years with Sadie by his side, her hand in his. His last words were of love for her, and his last sight was her face, still beautiful to him despite the passage of time. Sadie grieved deeply but found comfort in their children and grandchildren, in the legacy of love they had built together. She lived another 7 years, remaining active and engaged with her family, telling stories of the early days on the ranch and the cowboy who had given her a job and later his name. She passed away in her sleep in the spring of 1932, at the age of 77, in the bedroom she had shared with Yancey for so many years. Her children found her with a peaceful smile on her face, her hand resting on Yancey's pillow as though reaching for him even in death. They buried her beside Yancey in the small cemetery on the ranch, under a cottonwood tree with a view of the mountains they had both loved. The Sutton Ranch remained in the family for generations, a testament to what two people could build when they faced life's challenges together. And on quiet evenings when the wind blew just right across the high desert, people swore they could see two figures on the porch of the old ranch house, sitting side by side and holding hands as they watched the sunset, together for eternity as they had been in life. The ranch that Yancey had built, and Sadie had turned into a home, continued to thrive under the stewardship of their descendants. Jamie's son, another Yancey, proved to have his grandfather's business acumen and his grandmother's warm heart, expanding the operation while maintaining the values of hard work, integrity, and generosity that had defined the original Yancey and Sadie. The story of how Yancey and Sadie met became a treasured family tale, told and retold at gatherings and celebrations. The grandchildren and great-grandchildren would sit wide-eyed as the older generation recounted how their grandmother had arrived in Cimarron with nothing but a small bundle and a desperate need for work, and how their grandfather had seen beyond her circumstances to the remarkable woman she was. In 1978, on the 100th anniversary of Yancey and Sadie's meeting, the family organized a grand reunion at the ranch. Descendants came from all over the country, ranchers and teachers, doctors and business people, cowboys and city dwellers, all connected by the legacy of two people who had found each other in the most unlikely circumstances. A young great-great-granddaughter doing research for a school project discovered the original employment ledger where Yancey had recorded hiring Sadie as his housekeeper on June 15, 1878. The entry was simple: hired S. Kimball as housekeeper. $30 monthly plus room and board. She will do well. Below it, in different ink and clearly added later, was a single line: best decision I ever made. The family also found letters that Sadie had written to Reverend Matthews after her marriage, thanking him for his kindness during her darkest days and telling him about her new life. In one letter dated December 1879, she wrote, "I came to Cimarron believing my life was over, that I had nothing left to live for, but God had other plans. He brought me to a dusty street in front of a mercantile and put me in the path of a man whose kindness saved my life and whose love gave me a reason to live again. I have everything now: a husband who adores me, a beautiful son, a home that fills my heart with joy. I am living proof that even in our darkest moments, hope can find us if we are brave enough to keep going." These discoveries sparked renewed interest in Yancey and Sadie's story. A local historian wrote a book about the early ranchers of Colfax County, dedicating an entire chapter to the Suttons and their remarkable love story. The book included interviews with their children before they passed away, preserving their memories of parents who had loved each other deeply and raised their family with kindness, discipline, and an abundance of affection. Rose, before her death at 91, had recorded her memories. "My parents were not demonstrative people in public, but in our home, love was as natural as breathing. Father would come in from the range, and the first thing he always did was find Mother and kiss her hello. She would light up when he entered a room, even after decades of marriage. They held hands at the dinner table when Father said grace. They left little notes for each other around the house. They laughed together constantly." Growing up in that environment taught all of us what real love looked like: not the dramatic passion of novels, but the steady, devoted, day in day out choosing of each other that makes a marriage last. Thomas had shared similar memories. "Father once told me that the day he saw Mother standing outside that store was the day his real life began. He said everything before that had been preparation, and everything after was grace. He taught me that being a man was not about being tough or strong or successful, though he was all those things. Being a man was about keeping your word, protecting those who depended on you, and loving your wife with everything you had. I watched him live those values every single day." The twins, in a joint interview conducted when they were in their 80s, had reminisced about their mother's wisdom. "Mother told us that she had been married before Father, but it was not until she married him that she understood what marriage could be. She said her first marriage taught her survival, but her marriage to Father taught her to truly live. She encouraged us to wait for the kind of love she had found, the kind that made you better, that supported your dreams, that stood strong through hard times. Both of us were lucky enough to find that, and we credit her example for teaching us what to look for." As decades passed, and the world changed in ways Yancey and Sadie could never have imagined, automobiles replacing horses, electricity reaching even remote ranches, men walking on the moon, their story remained a touchstone for their descendants. It reminded them where they came from, what their family stood for, and what was truly important in life. The ranch itself became a kind of shrine to their memory. The original house, though expanded and modernized over the years, still contained the room where Sadie had slept that first night, where she had cried tears of relief and gratitude for being given a second chance. The porch where Yancey and Sadie had spent countless evenings was preserved and maintained, with the chairs they had favored still sitting in place. The meadow where Yancey had proposed to Sadie was designated a family landmark, and many of their descendants chose to propose to their own loves in that same spot, continuing a tradition that honored the original love story. The path to the meadow was well worn by generations of Suttons seeking that connection to their roots. In 2010, 132 years after Yancey first saw Sadie outside the Mercantile, the family gathered again for another reunion. By then, the descendants numbered in the hundreds, spread across multiple states and pursuing careers Yancey and Sadie never could have imagined. But they all knew the story. They all understood that they existed because a cowboy had seen a desperate woman and chosen kindness, and because that woman had had the courage to accept help and eventually love. The family commissioned a bronze statue for the town of Cimarron, depicting Yancey and Sadie as they might have looked on their wedding day, him in his best suit, her in her simple cream dress, their hands clasped and their eyes locked on each other. The statue was placed in the town square with a plaque that read, Yancey and Sadie Sutton, 1878-1932. Their story began with a job offer and became a lifetime of love. They built a ranch, raised a family, and created a legacy that continues to inspire generations. May their example remind us that kindness changes lives, that love can bloom in unexpected places, and that the choices we make in a single moment can echo through eternity. At the unveiling ceremony, the oldest living descendant, Jamie's daughter Martha, then 100 years old, spoke to the assembled crowd. "I never met my grandfather Yancey. He died 10 years before I was born," she said, her voice still strong despite her age. "But I knew my grandmother Sadie well. I was 22 when she passed, and I spent many afternoons sitting with her, listening to her stories. She told me about coming to Cimarron with nothing, about standing outside that mercantile wondering if she would survive another week. She told me about the tall cowboy who approached her with respect and kindness when everyone else had turned her away. She told me about falling in love, about building a life, about the joy and the hardships they faced together." Martha paused, her eyes sweeping across the sea of descendants before her. But the thing she emphasized most was this: what made their story special was not that they fell in love, but that they chose love every single day after that. Grandfather chose to see beyond her circumstances to her character. Grandmother chose to trust again after loss. Together, they chose partnership, respect, honesty, and dedication. They chose each other through droughts and prosperity, through the loss of children and the joy of grandchildren, through youth and old age. That is the real legacy, not the ranch, not the success, but the example of what it means to love completely and to be loved in return. As the crowd applauded, and the statue was revealed, the sun broke through the clouds in a brilliant shaft of light, illuminating the bronze figures as though blessing them. Some of the more poetic family members swore it was a sign that Yancey and Sadie were somehow present, pleased with how their story was being honored and remembered. The statue became a landmark in Cimarron, with tourists and locals alike stopping to read the plaque and learn about the cowboy and the desperate woman whose love story had shaped an entire family. Young couples would often have their photos taken beside it, hoping perhaps that some of that legendary love would bless their own relationships. And every year on June 15th, the anniversary of the day Yancey hired Sadie, the Sutton family would gather at the ranch for a celebration. They would eat foods made from Sadie's original recipes, preserved carefully through generations. They would tell the old stories and create new ones. They would walk to the meadow where Yancey had proposed, to the cemetery where the original couple lay side by side, and to the porch where they had spent so many evenings together. The current generation of young Suttons, growing up in a world of instant communication and rapid change, found something deeply appealing in their ancestors' story. It represented a kind of authentic, lasting love that seemed rare in modern times. It reminded them that real love was not about grand gestures or perfect circumstances, but about two people committing to face life together, to support each other through whatever came, to choose kindness and partnership over ego and independence. One particularly insightful great-great-great-granddaughter, a college student studying history, wrote her thesis on the role of women in Western expansion, using Sadie's story as a central example. Through extensive research in county records, church archives, and family documents, she pieced together a detailed picture of Sadie's life. She discovered that Sadie had not just been a housekeeper, but had been instrumental in the ranch's success. Records showed that Sadie had managed the household finances, negotiated with merchants for better prices, started several side businesses including selling preserved foods and baked goods to other ranchers, and had been a silent partner in Yancey's business decisions. The thesis argued that women like Sadie were the unsung heroes of Western expansion, providing the stability, wisdom, and practical skills that allowed their families and communities to thrive. The thesis won several awards and was eventually published as a book, bringing renewed attention to Sadie's story and to the stories of countless other women who had helped build the West through their labor, intelligence, and perseverance. Through all of this, the reunions, the statue, the academic recognition, the essence of Yancey and Sadie's story remained remarkably simple. A man saw a woman in need and chose to help. A woman accepted that help with gratitude and dignity. They fell in love, built a life together, and created something that lasted far beyond their own years. Their descendants carried forward the values they had embodied: hard work, integrity, kindness to those in need, devotion to family, and above all, the belief that love was not just a feeling but a choice made daily. These values shaped ranchers and teachers, business owners and artists, parents and grandparents, creating ripples that spread far beyond the original ranch in New Mexico. As the 21st century progressed, the Sutton Ranch remained in family hands, now run by a sixth-generation Sutton who balanced modern ranching techniques with traditional values. The house where Yancey and Sadie had lived, loved, and raised their family was carefully maintained, a living museum to their memory. On quiet evenings, when the work was done, and the desert sun painted the sky in brilliant colors, the current generation would sometimes sit on that same porch where Yancey and Sadie had spent so many hours. They would hold hands with their own spouses, watch their children play in the yard, and feel a deep connection to the couple who had started it all. The story of the cowboy who gave a desperate woman a job and later his name had become more than family history. It had become a testament to the transformative power of kindness, the enduring strength of true love, and the legacy that two ordinary people could create when they chose each other against all odds. And though Yancey and Sadie had been gone for many decades, their love story continued to live on in the ranch they built, in the family they created, in the values they instilled, and in the hearts of all who heard their tale and chose to believe that love, real and lasting love, was not just possible but worth fighting for, worth building on, worth cherishing every single day. Their story had begun on a dusty street in Cimarron in 1878, but it had no ending. It continued in every couple who chose partnership over independence, in every person who offered kindness to someone in need, in every family that valued love and commitment over convenience and comfort. Yancey and Sadie's love had created something eternal, something that would continue to inspire and guide as long as their descendants told their story and lived by their example. That, in the end, was their true legacy, not wealth or status or fame, but love. Pure, simple, enduring love that had started with a job offer and had blossomed into something that would never truly die, but would live on forever in the hearts and lives of those who came after them.